Shalom. Let me get straight into this lesson. I'm going to be playing some of this video, maybe about a minute before I get into this lesson. But she's going to say something, that's pretty heavy going into, so-called Christianity. Let me play this video.
And I think that most people are picturing those Nazi groups. They're picturing the skinheads. They're picturing the Klan. They're picturing all of that stuff. But what they don't realize is that there are white supremacists here in America today, and a lot of them, so many of them, they're packaged in Jesus and packaged in church, and they wear little crosses, and they look really sweet, and they're absolutely not. I want to share with you.
You heard what she said? So this is the construct of America. So-called white, because they true ethnicities are Edomites. And that's something that they've been able to influence the whole world under these false narratives. But like she was breaking down, this is your average Christian, so-called white person that you bump into in a grocery store that's going to tell you Jesus love you. But deep inside, they got the perpetual hatred for you, Jake. You know what I'm saying? They the devil in the flesh. And, long as they can control the narrative, long as they can control their version of Christianity and you follow it, it's all good. But once that's challenged, they get offended. I'm going to break down their psychology. And play this one more time so you can get it.
Jesus and packaged in church. Of that stuff. But what they don't realize is that there are white supremacists here in America today, and a lot of them, so many of them, they're packaged in Jesus and packaged in church, and they wear little crosses, and they look really sweet, and they're absolute.
So they're packaged as so-called Jivas, which I went into the video yesterday, the image that they see. Matter of fact, let me just get it. I'm going to keep beating this in your head. 1 second. And this go to show you that they still in control. So when you type that name Jivas in Google, this is what comes up by default. This false imagery that's, started around the 1600s, really goes back into ancient Egypt, Serapis Christos, that's a whole nother lesson. But by default, they got this as a default imagery when you think about the Messiah. Right here. This is what I'm talking about. And this is what's in most of the minds of the people, including you Jakes, you so-called blacks, Hispanic, and Native Americans, have been conformed, and your mind has been indoctrinated under this style of Christianity, and you don't know it in a lot of cases. Right? So she went into some heavy stuff. So let's get into this. So this is who everybody sees in their mind. They actually see this personality as well. So when they talk about the Messiah, this is who they are talking about. And this is a lie. So if you don't conform to this, if you don't agree with this, all of a sudden, you by hate, you come to name calling, right? But I'm going to get into the psychology behind that. Let's go here. And the average so-called white person, and you Jakes, that's outside of the truth, you think this way. Let's go to this term, cognitive denialism. What does this mean? Cognitive denial refers to a psychological mechanism where individuals refuse to acknowledge or accept reality, often to avoid anxiety or discomfort associated with a difficult truth. And this difficult truth that the average so-called white person got a tough time in their mind digesting is the Messiah was a so-called black man. And he was hardcore. He wasn't loving. He didn't love everybody. He was stern. He would be considered mean in today's terminology. And that's something that the so-called white race don't want to acknowledge. And he hide under this white identity so they can exert that authority over you, because white is associated with something positive. So your average so-called white person, even if they don't subscribe to Christianity, still subscribe to so-called white supremacy. Let's get more into this. It says this can be a defense mechanism against uncomfortable or stressful information. And this stressful information that's stressful to the Edomites and to some of you Jakes is the Messiah was a so-called black man. And he only came here for the nation of Israel. You so-called blacks, Hispanic, and Native Americans. That makes up the bulk of the Israelites. And then you got the other Israelites scattered among the heathen and look like the heathen in a lot of cases. So let's get out of this. This truth agitates these Christians, especially the so-called white man. And they get, they start doing a name calling when they can't defend the truth. Let's get all into this deeply. It says, number one, it says challenge to cultural identity. It says for centuries in Western culture, which would be by default Edomite culture, they hide under that white label so they can assert that authority over you. But we breaking that down. They're going to start being called by their true ethnicity, which are Edomites. It says they got Jivas has been portrayed as so-called white. Blonde or light brown hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. These images became cultural symbols, not just religious ones. Challenging that image can feel like challenging a person's entire framework of faith, tradition, or cultural identity. Number two, cognitive dissonance. And I went into this word yesterday, right? I'm going to break it down some more today. It says cognitive dissonance, or this phrase rather, when someone has believed something their whole life, aka white Jesus, and they're confronted with historical or biblical evidence showing otherwise, it creates cognitive dissonance. Mental discomfort from holding two conflicting beliefs. Some people react to this discomfort with denial, anger, or defensiveness. That's what you Christians do, especially the so-called white Christian. Number three, it says control over the narrative. I'm gonna go deep into that. It says historically, colonialism and so-called white supremacy involved shaping religion to justify power structures. Presenting a so-called white Jivas helped reinforce dominance, suggesting even God looked like the ruling class. To some, re-examining Jiva's appearance and background is a threat to that control of the religious narrative. I'm going to expound more on this. This heavy. It says, let's keep going. It says, the facts. It says Jivas, which his true name is Yahushua, was a brown-skinned Israelite. They got Jewish man. That's new speak. From the so-called Middle East. That's another new term. Middle East. He's from the land of Israel, Judea, Yahweh, to be exact. And he was from the tribe of Yahweh, Judah. And he was brown-skinned, dark brown-skinned man. It says the Bible never describes Jivas as so-called white. It says images of so-called white Jesus started spreading during a Renaissance. Renaissance means rebirth. They rebirthed the Greek and Roman Edomite culture back into the earth, and they whitewashed everything. And colonial periods, mainly in so-called Europe. Final thought. Now I'm gonna get into some more information. This ain't it. It's not about attack. Matter of fact, let's just keep going. Number three, because I want to expound on this control over the narrative. Let's get deep. It says, when European powers, which would be Edomites, Spain, Britain, France, Portugal, etc., began colonizing the Americas, Africa, and Asia, they didn't just bring guns. Check this out. They brought religion. Christianity, especially Catholicism and Protestantism, was used as a tool of control, Jake. They presented so-called white Jesus to to native and enslaved populations, which made colonizers appear God-like or chosen by God, Yahweh. It says Christian missionaries painted Jivas, angels, and saints as so-called white, and even Satan as black or dark skinned, reinforcing racial superiority. Why it mattered? Because you Christians will say it don't matter, you talking hate, all this dumb as the deflect. We're not falling for that. It says why it mattered. If God is white and you are ruled by so-called white people, then it creates the illusion that so-called white people are divinely superior, a psychological control mechanism. It's in the mind, Jake. The mind controls the body. What you do and you don't do starts with a belief system. Art as propaganda. I'm gonna be doing a lesson in particular on this subject right here. This is a heavy topic right here. It says art as propaganda. It says from the Renaissance period onward, artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and others painted biblical figures with European features, Edomite features, so-called white features. This wasn't accidental. These whitewashed images spread across Europe and were exported to the colonies. Over time, people forgot they were symbolic and began treating them as historical fact. Check this out. Matter of fact, I went into this. Psychological impact, religious symbolism, and authority. It says religious, listen up to this, Jake. All this heavy, man. You got to really watch these lessons over and over again. And not just watch the lesson and move on to the next. You got to analyze it. You got to break it down. You got to overstand it. Religious imagery sticks deep in the mind. They know this. I'm going to read that again. Religious imagery sticks deep in the mind. This image, let me go to it. I'm going to jump right back, because I want to make sure I finish this off, because it's very important. This imagery is in the mind, and when you Google Christianity, this comes up. Let's go back. It says religious imagery sticks deep in the mind. For many, the image of Jivas is tied to morality, divinity, love, justice. If all holy figures were so-called white, then white people are seen as closer to God. This creates a mental hierarchy even among non-so-called white Christians, where so-called whiteness is subconsciously associated with goodness and leadership. This is the subconscious mind they have tapped into and indoctrinated, and you don't know this until it's brought to your attention. Let's close this up. Modern day effects of the narrative. Even today, you'll see so-called white Jesus statues in so-called black churches, black, Hispanic, and so-called Native American churches. Check this out. The second one. Christian movies with so-called white actors playing Jivas, Moses, Mary, etc. It says Christian curriculum in schools reinforcing this image. It says, and whenever someone challenges this, people react defensively because it feels like you're undermining Christianity. You're attacking the ideal of Jesus. That's why they'll say Jesus is love. Completely a lie that they have conjured up. You're questioning it says you're questioning their entire religious upbringing. But in truth, you're calling out how religion was weaponized. Is that it? It says bottom line. Portraying so-called Jivas as white was never about accuracy. It was about control. Control of the mind. Control of the faith. Control of how people see themselves and others see in the eyes of God. That's heavy, man. Hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Allah, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rachak, Kodash. Shalom.